Hi again, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Knight's Report, presented by Yes Air Conditioning and Plumbing. Great to have you with us here today, Dave Gosher, Dan Duva, and Mike McKenna. We're hoping that Shane Knighty might be able to join us somewhere in the show, but who knows? There's internet problems, and we'll see if the sheriff is able to join us. But better than that, we have Riley Smith joining us here from the Smith compound. Riley, thanks for taking a few minutes here. How's life? What have the last 8 weeks been like for you?
Well, thanks for having me. I think it's pretty similar to everyone. Cooped up in the house for a while, taking the dog for a lot of walks and pretty much finding a new room to clean every day. So running out of space and things to do, but, making the most of it. I'm sure everyone has these same issues.
Riley, we've been wondering at what point might the NHL resume. In terms of the time frame, it's now been over 2 months. How much longer we have to wait? What has been the waiting process been like for you in terms of the uncertainty?
I think the waiting process is probably the worst part of everything. I think as professional athletes, it's not the hardest thing to wake up and train every day and try to stay mentally focused, but not knowing like the scenario where we could eventually play changes a lot. And then along with that, just, the situation we're in with safety involved, and it makes it tough on a lot of people. Being in Vegas, we don't really see the brunt of what's going on in, this country and in Canada, but there's places that are hit a lot harder than we are, so we have to be cognizant of that and understand that different teams are going to have different obstacles.
In terms of the training, do you alter it to be more like a summer training regiment, or is it kind of a modified in season? How do you gauge that in preparation for starting a hockey season that you don't know when's going to get going again?
That's the tough part. There's no doubt about that. I think at the beginning of this process, it's really just trying to maintain strength. So kind of circuit training and things along those lines, but we didn't think it was going to go on this long. So as the weeks go on, you start to modify it more. And with no realistic date set, you're kind of changing a lot. And I think at this point, I'm, trying to lift heavier and try to maybe get some strength back, because, it still could be, weeks or months before we actually start playing. So you do have to modify it, and it's tough not knowing, because your strategy definitely changes.
Is it daily communication, Riley, with you and your teammates about when you might come back, if you might come back? Is there a group text? How's it work day to day?
I think early on in this process, we were probably on the phone a little bit more often. The last probably 3 weeks, it's been pretty sparse. We all expected we'd have an answer by now. Not having that answer, I think, is the toughest part. So, we at least jump on a call once a week, but even once a week, sometimes there's nothing new that's happened. So there's just so many moving parts where, teams have different obstacles. There's different things going on in different places, and to have all 31 teams on the same page with all the owners at the same time right now, it's a pretty daunting task.
Riley, there's been a talk from some players, including Max Pacioretty, who would play in the Arctic if he needed to, and some other players who have basically said, I have no interest in getting back in. What is your appetite for getting back into hockey, and what are the concerns that you have in terms of hockey itself, or in terms of the health of yourself and your teammates?
Obviously playing on a great team like we have this year and leading our division, there's a lot of optimism to be able to finish the season. We played 71 games already, and it's tough to see that go to waste. With saying that, there's teams that are in a different situation than us. And for them, there's different concerns, teams that don't think that they have a chance of winning the Stanley Cup, or those bubble teams. One, you have just the apparent issue of just safety concerns, and that's a worldwide thing right now. So that's a tough one to get around. you also have the concerns of, jumping back into the season without having reasonable enough time to get back and train and get your body ready. And then obviously with some of the new ideas of how we could start a season, people being away from their families for a long period of time. And I think that's really tough on people.
Riley, you're the perfect person I thought having on today to ask you about this. It's changing the subject a little bit. I apologize on that. But recently, Jack Dugan agreed to come out of college early, join the Golden Knights organization. And I thought having you was perfect because you left Miami University early to come play pro hockey. Played there, of course, under the legendary assistant coach Nick Petraglia, current EKHL commissioner. But I'm curious what that transition was like, especially for our fans to hear, for a player coming out of college early to join the pro ranks. What was that transition like for you to make it to the NHL?
It's a special moment when you're able to do that. I think when you're playing in college, you still have a pipeline dream of playing in the NHL. It's still far away. And, congrats to Jack of having, 2 stellar seasons. I think he's probably going through something similar to I did, where I felt I did enough in college to leave early, and I know my parents really were stressing about finishing my 4 years and getting a degree, and that was the reason that I went to college. But for Jack, there's always time to go back and to get that. You can always chip away in summers and things like that. I think it's a special time, and I'm sure right now he's got a lot of extra time to spend with his family and really be thankful for where he's gotten, and I'm sure there's a lot of support that has helped him along the way.
All right, 2 questions, Riley. What were you studying in college, and did you go back and chip away?
So I first started with I was going to go into business, and then I changed it to more of a sports science. So I left after 3 years. I chipped away for a little bit. I still have a little bit left to go.
There's still some chipping.
And you also, I think Alec Martinez managed to go back and get his Miami University degree. Isn't that right?
Any advice from him?
That is right. I haven't picked his brain too much about it because I don't really have the itch right now to jump back into it. But like Mike did mention, Nick Traglia, he's a part of their system there, and he does a great job helping players go back and complete their degree. I know he's been pushing me to do it for a while, so depending on how long this quarantine goes on, I may have to open the books a little bit. But
Riley, I'm just curious because obviously Jack coming out of Providence College, Dave loves the state of Rhode Island, of course, but so many guys might choose to go the junior route. What advice would you have for someone who is approaching that decision, whether to go into major junior or go into the college ranks?
I think really base it on who you are. Don't try to base it on anyone else. I know for me, I needed more time to physically mature. There wasn't OHL teams that were really running after me and really forcing me or pressing me to join their teams. And that was a godsend because being able to spend 3 years at Miami University was the perfect thing for me. And also the great thing about the college system is just being able to spend night and day for 3 or 4 years, whatever it may be, with your teammates. You really grow that bond. And I think some of my best friends are the people I played college hockey with.
Some pretty good teammates there. You look at that list of guys that also played in the NHL. Carter Camper. I've been teammates with a few. Trent Vogelhuber, Will Weber. Really good company that you had at Miami there. That's good advice for anybody coming out of school or going into it. It's a hard decision to make, especially if you don't know where to go. At college, major, junior, it's not an easy task.
No, and it's not. And if you are going to go the college route, you really have to be cognizant of the fact that it is a major commitment, and it's not easy to juggle school and high level hockey at the same time. I felt like as soon as I went and started playing pro, I had all this extra time on my hands where I wasn't running from one class to the next and trying to juggle meals and doing homework and trying to find sleep at the same time.
Is that why Nate Schmidt's always looking for hobbies now, I wonder?
Guaranteed. Yeah, I should just give my Miami login and let him do my classes for me.
Hey, last question for you, Riley, is you started this by saying that you seemed like you've been cleaning a different room in the house every day. So is the place spick and span now? Like, are you in charge of that? How's that work?
I think it's been, probably the cleanest it is since we moved in. I think I'm driving my fiance a little crazy, just bothering her to clean everything and clean it over and over again. But it's, since you spend so much time inside the house, it's nice for it to be clean. And I think the funny thing for me is, I've been outside. I mean, everyone in Vegas spends so much time outside, especially with the weather we have. But I'll clean, our patio, and 2 seconds later it gets windy again and blows all the dirt back. So I'll be, mopping up or sweeping up 4 or 5 times a day just to try to keep my brain sane.
Well, it never ends. But Riley, thank you very much for your time. Stay safe, and hopefully we can see you in person real soon. Thanks again.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Riley.
And we thank Riley Smith for joining us. Let him get back to his cleaning. So out with one player, in with a former player. And there he is. There's Shane. So I mentioned at the top of the show, Shane, that we were hoping you were going to join us, but there was some internet situation at the 90 Estates. What's going on over there?
Well, you have multiple. This was the minor getting on with you guys. It's the Zoom school was more important. So, anyways, everything's when you got 4 to 5 devices going. Sometimes it needs a little bit of a reboot, reset, and I'm happy that I was able to even get on. I thought at a point nobody would, but here I am. So
did we interrupt Zoom school though?
No, well, not mine. I'm not.
No, I know you're not.
Are you going back?
Anymore.
We just talked about that with Riley.
Last thing I'm doing.
Shane's going back as a teacher.
Yeah, it's algebra day.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Phys ed teacher.
Yeah. So, well, good to see Shane with us now. And, the quarantine continues, obviously, guys, here as we're into 2 months now. And, we have seen, some movement in some of the other sports, including a proposal in Major League Baseball about maybe playing an 82-game schedule that seems to have been met with some resistance from the players on the baseball side, the NBA, some players starting to trickle back. And then yesterday, Gary Bettman talking in a virtual town hall with San Jose Sharks, a town hall with some of their business people, saying he has not contemplated in any way canceling the season. So I think, Shane, they continue to look, and this seems to change on a daily basis, continue to look to find some way anyway to try to salvage, if not the rest of the regular season, at least some sort of a playoffs.
Yeah, I think the one thing, the longer it goes, the different scenarios pop up. So, there was longstanding that they wanted to finish the regular season. Then there was a condensed regular season. Well, now the talk is going to a 24 or 20 team playoff. And I think, and I understand Bettman wanting to get this done. I agree with him. I think if they can, let's hand out the Stanley Cup. Let's have these teams play for it because, they played the majority of the season. So, but a 24-team playoff, we'll see if that can happen. The only thing I don't like is the 9 to 12, the 10 and 11 get an advantage to play to get in. That gives when you have such a short time to come back. I think it's advantageous to get extra games. So I'm not sure how this is all going to work out. That said, we'll see if it can happen. I like that Gary Bettman's made the statement, but there's a lot of things, as you get excited about it, you got to step back and, realize there's a lot of safety. There's a lot of issues. There's a lot of testing. There's, a lot of different scenarios that need to be laid out for it to work. But I think eventually when this happens, I think the numbers of teams are going to go down. It's hard trying to keep everybody in the fight. I think I said a while ago, I had no problem with going straight to the 16-team playoff. We'll see if it gets to that point. But right now, it's what's being tossed around, and the plan, I guess the most recent one is of either a 24 or a 20-team playoff format. heading in straight to playoffs.
You know, one thing, Dan, that the league seems pretty set on is unless all 31 teams can come back and start to maybe ramp up some training, nobody's going to come back. You know, the NBA has seemed to allow, you know, wherever you might be in the country, players maybe to start to matriculate back a little bit, but which I think the NHL side of it is a good call. You know, you don't want to create an unfair advantage, right? Especially, I mean, everyone's been in the same boat here for the last 8 weeks.
Right. And you also have to consider just the travel for the players. Some people are not in the United States, and the border between the United States and Canada is not open presently. That will have to change. And just in comparison to baseball, it's a good point to make, Dave, in that, and Shane says that the Golden Knights have played 71 games. Of course, baseball has played 0 games. And the contention there is with Major League Baseball about salary and the players having to not only take a half their salary, but then also the revenue sharing. On the NHL side, the players have received all but one of their paychecks. So it's not so much a negotiation for the salary that has been promised to them in the world of Major League Baseball. And then baseball also does not have a salary cap. That's another big part of their negotiation. So I would be, it's with baseball, the concern is more in terms of the negotiation between the league and the players union. It seems that the NHL and the NHLPA have been negotiating in pretty good faith here. I think that's one of the more encouraging things. But then you get into why 24 teams or why 20? Why not resume the regular season? And I can't help but think about trying to maximize the economics of this, because if you're going to wipe out the end of the regular season, but you want to have more teams, that means more games on TV and try to generate as much revenue. There's going to be a long-lasting effect for the National Hockey League financially. Who knows when the 2021 season starts? Maybe December, maybe even January, whether that's a shortened season, whether they have to push it back. There are a lot of things that the NHL has to be thinking about in terms of maximizing the dollars coming in. And right now, the only way to really do that is through, or the primary way of doing that anyhow, is through television revenue, which is why they'd want to have as many games as they can get.
I would imagine, Mike, the amount of things they're considering is staggering, right? You know, Dan touched on, you've got players that are back overseas. You have players that are in Sweden. Sweden really has done nothing, right, in terms of trying to combat the coronavirus, that everyone's just kind of carrying on. That's the approach they've taken. I'm curious to see how this all works. You mentioned the border still isn't open between the U.S. and Canada, getting everyone back. You have to quarantine for 14 days if what I read is correct. So amazing the amount of things that the NHL and the Players Association must be juggling and trying to, you know, find as much common ground as possible right now.
Well, and especially because hockey has such a unique parameter. You have to have ice. You have to play on ice. And that's what makes it unique for the training aspect. It's not like the NBA where, you know, you can go down to your local park and shoot hoops if you want. You know, you don't have that need to have something that's so rare in society in some places, just a sheet of ice. So to me, that's number one, that competitive advantage. You want to make sure that all teams are in the same boat with that, bringing back players from overseas. A good example of this right now actually going on in IndyCar and sports car racing. I'm a big fan of that and following it. They have drivers currently in Europe and they're scheduled to race June 6th. Some of these drivers are having a hard time bringing back to get them here in the first place, then quarantine. So they're having to figure out backup plans for some of those drivers. That's something we may face in hockey if we can't get ahead of that. I think it'll be figured out in time. I would expect it to be, especially considering the public stature of sports and really just how bad the desire is to have sports back for a sense of normalcy. And just going back to what you said, Shane, about the 2014 format, 9, 10, 11, 12, having to play games and being in game form. The question for me is, though, if you're one of the teams that's ahead, would you take that bye or would you rather play those games and not being guaranteed of moving on? I'd still take the bye and be guaranteed of moving on. So I don't think that whatever scenario comes up is going to make everybody happy. But even when this started, it seemed like 24 teams was really the cutoff point for where those teams still have an opportunity to make the show, to make playoffs. And it made a lot of sense to go from there. But yeah, there's just so much when it comes to logistics here. And as bad as we all want it to happen, it's just the great unknown, right?
Well, right now, too, fellas, and that's a good way to put it, Mike, the great unknown is as we sit here in mid-May, I wanted to kind of phrase this to you guys, and Shane, we'll start with you. Where are you on the spectrum? Are you optimistic, pessimistic, realistic, a blend of some of all three? Where do you sit as far as, are they going to be able to find a way to somehow finish this season?
Well, as you guys know, I'm always full of joy.
You are a ray of sunshine.
So it's no surprise that I'm the optimist on this. No, I really believe it's going to happen. I just think you're too far in the season for it to go. I think there's got to be a way. Obviously, there's a lot of hurdles they still got to clear before this can happen. But I think in a scenario that this is something that certainly can be done. I think the biggest thing right now, and we've talked about it, I don't want to get too big into the one side, but you have to have testing availability and results availability. But once that comes, there's no way. I strongly believe you can find a scenario in which you can put players and teams and do it safely. Obviously, no fans, probably calling games differently than we're all used to, but I think there's a way to get these games played, to broadcast them, and to put the game of hockey back on TV.
Dan, where do
and
you?
Radio. Sorry, Dan.
And
radio,
and radio.
everything, on everything
Yeah.
for everything.
Any possible mode.
We could all be in Studio 31, 6 feet apart from each other. We
Yeah.
don't know.
Dan, where do you sit on this?
Yeah, I tend to lean towards Shane, but I have from the beginning tried to take the realistic approach. And I just remember us talking about, weeks and weeks ago. Here we are 2 weeks into this. It's hard to project a month out or 2 months out. Okay, now we're 2 months into this. It feels like 2 years, right? But it's also going to be hard to know exactly where we are 2 months from now. And I have a lot of faith in the leadership, and I'm encouraged by the interaction, as I mentioned earlier, between the NHL and the NHLPA, and the resources that the NHL has made available to itself. And when I hear Gary Bettman say that he's not considered canceling the season, and the Mercury News had the quote, Gary Bettman saying that canceling the season would be the easy way out, because it would basically say that we're not trying our hardest to figure this out. And I think that in bringing in the right experts, the medical folks, the logistical folks, it is going to be a logistical nightmare that I can't imagine. But they are so good at figuring these things out. So I tend to be on the realistic side, because we don't know what the future is going to be. I'm encouraged by what I'm hearing right now. And my thinking is that they will play hockey. There will be a Stanley Cup awarded at some point in the next several months. And I'm going to go with the realistic approach, Dave.
Mike, where are you on the spectrum?
I'm such a pessimistic person. And it's funny because this is the one thing that I actually have optimism on in a pretty strong capacity. I just goes back so often to what the players have said, and that Jonathan Marchessault so quote from when this first started, of how we just have to award the Stanley Cup. There has to be a winner. We can't have played 70-something games and not have it. And I think the optimism on my side of this comes from trusting science, trusting officials, trusting innovation. I saw an article the other day that there's a company out of Syracuse that's devised a drone that can sanitize arenas. So sometimes it's not always a clear-cut way to a finish line, but where there's a means, there's an end. Sometimes you can find it, and that's all said though, knowing that one little thing can send everything sideways, and that's the big fear of it. But I just feel like across the board, there's so much of the desire to make this happen that if minds get together and the science proves out in the way that this can get done safely, it will. So I'm optimistic on it. I really am. And part of that too is just my desire to see hockey again. And I know it's shared by so many people. We just want to get back to doing what we love.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You mentioned too, Mike, about, and I think I'm probably on the realistic side of it, that there's so many things that have to happen for this to happen, for them to be able to come back and make it safe. And, I don't know if you guys saw, we all know Peter King, columnist, NFL columnist for NBC Sports. And he interviewed Dr. Fauci recently and asked Dr. Fauci about NFL teams and said, if 4 players the night before a game test positive, what do you have to do? And he said, you have to shut it down. And I try not to go down that road with, God forbid, NHL teams, that if you're in the third round of the playoffs, and, I know Bill Daly has said if one player test positive, that would not mean you shut it down. But what if it is 4? What if it's your 4 best
You
players?
sound like a pessimist, not a realist.
Well, yeah, maybe you're right. It's all gone to hell.
Yeah, but does that mean do you not try? You know,
Oh, you
like
have to.
if we
You
have to
it,
try,
Mike.
and
Yes.
that's what kind of what we're getting at is that
Yep.
you just can't
Yep.
throw in the towel. That's what Gary Bettman's saying. We can't just give up on this thing.
And the point that Shane made earlier about the testing, and it is testing to see if you have the disease, and you have to have near instant results. It can't be the sort of deal where you take a test and then you wait a couple of days. It's going to have to be near daily testing. And the other part of this is how many people have had the disease, didn't know it, or had extremely mild symptoms. So the antibody test is essential because there will be people who may have already had the disease. So that the testing, the daily testing, is going to be essential, while the NHL also has to keep in mind the optics of not taking away tests from people who might need them. The medical industry can't be made second fiddle to a professional sports league, and I'm sure that the NHL would not want to do that. But that's the other thing. Are there going to be the resources available on that side too?
Yeah, and they still have some time on their side for sure. You know, and that is one thing that they certainly can utilize. All right, guys, before we wrap it up, rapid fire. I know you love these. Get the brain percolating a little bit, Shane. So, all right, here's the question today. If you could be a Golden Knight for a day, who would it be and why?
Who's up, me?
Sure, let's start. Start at the top.
Old Mark Stone. 9.5 million reasons.
Yeah. Can you spend 9.5 in a day, Shane? What would you buy with your?
I don't know. Just pay. I got
Better internet.
College, university.
Bandwidth galore.
I'd buy better. Yeah, that's an easy answer for this one.
Dan, all right. So Shane wasted little time and went straight to the financial part. What about you?
Yeah, geez, that is a tough one. I think who is more beloved in this town among the Golden Knights than goaltender Marc-Andre Fleury? I don't think you can go wrong with that. Terrific personality. I could only dream of having his sense of humor and his smile too. And the hair. He's got a lot of hair too, which I am losing at a regular pace. So I'm going to go with Marc-Andre Fleury, Dave.
And he makes a decent wage too. So
yeah, what's it, 7.5? Right? Yeah, that's not quite Mark Stone money, but it's right there.
That's right.
Yeah, it goes pretty well.
He's got a cool car too. I like the car.
Yeah, the Lambo. That's not a bad pick.
I like his 70 Chevelle.
I'm a sports car guy. I'll take the Lambo. And Dan, man, I'd like to be Marc-Andre, kindred spirits in some way for sure. But you know what? Somebody who's got his whole career ahead of him and is just hitting peak. Shea Theodore would be a pretty good place to be in life right now. Talk about playing good hockey, good person. That'd be a fun place to be with a lot of head. You know, it'd be fun to be able to play that many years again.
Man,
how about Dave?
Well, and I'm surprised nobody's picked this.
Yeah,
person.
I know, because he lives life.
Because he doesn't have any bad days. Nate Schmidt.
Yeah, that was going to be my number 2.
Yeah. I think he's getting financially. He's doing just fine for himself as well. But he may have bad days.
Rarely.
I haven't seen any. You know, we haven't. When our times around him, everyone has their moments, but his are very, very rare. So
right. Well, he never stops talking, just like you.
Yeah, that's right. What else do you want to talk about? What do you
He's
want
not
to
the only one amongst us that's been accused of that.
That's fair. That's fair.
All right, boys. Well, those are good. So Mark Stone, Flower, and Shea Theodore, and Nate Schmidt. All right,
that's a good crew. I like that.
That'd be a good dinner table.
Yeah, that's a good quartet. Shane, thanks for joining us briefly. This has been fun.
You're welcome.
And thank you all for joining us. Of course, Night's Report brought to you by Yes Air Conditioning and Plumbing. Stay safe, stay healthy. We'll talk to you next time on Night's Report.